So with thanks to Carrie for your support, our project was very much focused on music listening for well-being. And across the pandemic, that focus changed for a number of reasons to orient ourselves towards university students. The rationale for that is something that's becoming more and more clear across Australia and around the world, that even prior to the pandemic, university students were experiencing higher levels of distress and anxiety compared to people of the same age who are outside of the university system. So this is a pretty intriguing fact for universities generally, and suggests that there is something about the action of coming to university which is inherently stressful when compared to the other life challenges that people who aren't at university are also facing, such as starting new careers or looking for employment, potentially even starting families. So it's not that university students are the only ones facing significant transitions. So there's quite a lot of intrigue about that. And there's been a strong call for a very broad mental health approach. So rather than sending everybody off to counselling, which at the University of Melbourne goes by the acronym Counselling and Psychological Services, CAPS, that perhaps this is not a pathology that needs to be read as the seeking of care, but rather that we have some duty to address people's capacity to manage, the unquestionable stress which is related to being assessed on a regular basis, or in the case of a PhD, in a very big way at the end of a long period of work. So people have been arguing to examine the structural barriers for people's flourishing, and also thinking about what kinds of programs can be helpful and interesting for people to support their well-being. And of course, music and other creative art forms are a critical part of the answer to that question, because of the affordances of music in particular for bringing people together in active and creative ways, which is central to Carrie's mission. But our focus, like Amanda's, was specifically on music listening. And music listening has indeed proven itself to be popular and very commonplace for university students to use as a mode of self-regulation during difficult times. My own research in this space, my background is in psychotherapy, and my own research has identified that whilst this is a fantastic strategy with plenty of potential for support, that the ways that music operates can sometimes become problematic if people have a tendency of falling into patterns of music listening that are actually reinforcing the challenges that they're facing, or promoting venting in a way that doesn't lead to kind of self-regulation. So not always as helpful as we intuitively feel it could be. So the focus for our project then was to take those two pieces of knowledge and to run a project with university students during the pandemic to help them check their ways of music listening for wellbeing, and to provide them with some psychoeducation about how they could be using music more helpfully if they weren't doing so already. So brief context for the study itself: we ran 4 workshops with university students across 2021. The proximity to lockdowns and assessment periods are noted there. The hashtag is the one that talks about the proximity to assessment weeks. If you can see, that is related to workshop 1 and workshop 4. And the Melbourne lockdowns, which were quite serious and did impact our students at the University of Melbourne very significantly, connected more closely to the 2 final workshops. You'll see that we had quite a number of people attending. The greatest number of people attended in the workshop that has both the hashtag and the asterisk, which meant there were plenty of conditions creating stress, and therefore people were motivated to find ways of managing their stress during this time. But you'll also see that there's some different numbers in the workshops across the board. That the number of people that completed their pre-test data is reasonable, And the number of people that completed their post-test data was not particularly helpful for any kind of analysis of significance, which was disappointing. And Carmen, who's here, did a fantastic job of maintaining contact with people for the 4 weeks after we ran the workshops, and with engaging weekly emails, just reminding people of the strategies that they had learned about, but to no avail in getting much more qualitative data for us. This slide is a little small and probably of interest to some people, but we actually followed a really close script across the 4 workshops because we were intending for it to be a pre-post analysis, and therefore we were looking for consistency in the intervention in order to be able to compare the 4 groups despite quite significant differences in the conditions of time. And so both Carmen and I ran the workshops. We ran the first one together, and then Carmen ran the subsequent ones once we'd nailed all the technologies, because there was quite a lot of music sharing and other aspects to it, and lots of work in the chat that went on. But we essentially worked through kind of 4 key learnings, which were to do with the different ways that people might be using music intuitively, how they might test themselves in whether or not that was effective for them, the ideas about mood matching, is rather than trying to simply put yourself miraculously into a better mood, but rather to meet and move your mood using a sequence of music, which came around to the idea of exploring playlist construction, incorporating people's preferred musics in ways that were intentional and that would help them to make selections that best enhanced their intentions for what they were using music for. So if you think about university students in particular, plenty of people with music on in the background, some people who are using nice lo-fi music and trying to keep things calm and cover up other sounds. Other people, one of our core tenets was to be conscious of the random selection of songs and how that could be counterproductive depending on whether songs pop up which get too much of your attention or which divert your attention to other things. And so we used a combination of storytelling and facts and experientials across the hour that we were together to try and use basic learning techniques to work with that. One of the commitments and the partnerships that we hoped to develop out of this project was indeed these connections to our industry colleagues. This ended up being the Highway Foundation, which is a not-for-profit organisation that supports young people generally and where music and wellbeing is considered to be a priority, and which, not by coincidence, became the home of one of our chief investigators, TC Chin, who therefore was in a perfect position to build our partnership with them at a time where schools were not really in a position to be partnering around research with ethics restrictions and all kinds of things at play. But our intention was to develop a suite of resources through the research that could be used as a part of either school-based or other youth-focused organisations' work in improving people's literacy around using music for wellbeing. And so we teamed up with a group of young people at the Highway Foundation and generated content which was very much related to our 1-hour intervention. And they produced and created a suite of videos. So I'd just like to share one of those with you now.
Choosing the right song for right now. So is there a right song for right now? By scientific standards, music's pretty reliable. Every time you listen to it, it sounds exactly the same. It's different if you go to a live gig or listen to a different version. But if you listen to the same track, nothing changes. It's as stable as can be. The beat's the same, the singing's the same, the riffs are the same. But it doesn't mean that your response is the same. The way you feel when you listen to a song can change. It might be a different day or a different year. It might be things that things have changed. Like when the meaning of a song can change if it goes from being a love song or to a breakup song. The way you feel when you listen to a song can change for other reasons too. It might be that your mood or your mental health has changed. You're in a good patch, and then the music will feel different to how it would feel when you were down. You might feel like listening to something different. When you feel less in control, overwhelmed easily, and things seem to be getting worse, it's time to start thinking about how your music might be affecting you differently. Perhaps music has always been your best friend, but these days, the two of you don't have that much fun together. Perhaps it's always about feeling down together. What are you meant to do about it? I know you don't want to stop listening to that song or those tracks. They are the ones that help you feel understood. For me, sometimes it feels like my music is the only thing that gets me, that I can relate to. How about a compromise? What about you start with listening to that song, but then think hard about what song you listen to next? How about you cue a track that's just a bit brighter? A song that you love that gives you energy rather than keeps you in the same place. Start with 2 songs and notice how it's okay to step yourself up. You still get the understanding you want from the first track, plus you get a booster. Now, what would the 3rd song be? And the 4th? What about taking a moment here to do that on your phone or wherever you listen to your music? Think about the sequence of events that will give you the understanding and space, but also turn things around for you. What about finding the right songs that can help you feel motivated, energetic, or calmer, or safer, or feeling and thinking more positively? Some songs might even remind you to reach out to someone you trust or support. If you want to hear more, check out our video about building new connections with songs.
So there's a series of 6 different videos with 5 different presenters, and quite beautifully created with the young people, and wonderful to hear coming out of their voices, less lecturing than old people such as ourselves. So we hope to be able to use those effectively. The analysis of the data, as you can imagine from the table which showed you the challenges we faced in data collection, is probably not as scintillating as the resources that were produced by the young people for this. We got some affirming quant data, which was mostly from point time 1 before the workshops, which said, yes, the tests seem to be working. There are inverse correlations between emotional well-being and distress, which is what you would expect to find. So that kind of accuracy was validated. The qual workshop data was useful in confirming that the learning outcomes that we had for the intervention were achieved. So we asked people to list, what did they learn out of the workshop, and that content certainly represented what we had been aiming for people to learn. Probably not a surprise there, given that they're very bright university students, and it was hopefully a reasonably engaging presentation. So that was somewhat interesting. We then tried to understand from the data that we did have if there was more that could be read from the ways they described their learnings. And we did interpret a distinction between people who expressed to an intention, what we called intentionality, to change the ways they were using music as a result of what they'd learned, as compared to people who made a more kind of theoretical reflection. Yes, here they all are, but didn't really make any reference to themselves and what they were planning to do. So for our convergent analysis, we then looked really closely at those people that had described what felt like increased intentionality, and went back to their T1 quant data to see if there were any signals that might say who's best primed to plan to make changes, or at least plan to make changes in their behaviour. Is there anything there? And what was most interesting, and again, I don't think surprising, but it still took a while to find, is that students that were both happy, interested in life and satisfied, and extremely stressed, quite high marks in distress, scores in distress, did seem to be the ones that were more, much more represented in the intention to change music listening behaviour. So that kind of makes sense. It's people who are generally doing well, but in this moment, it was actually, extremely distressed by both assessments and pandemic conditions. So thanks to our team for the support from Carrie as we moved through various iterations of this project, and to the many students that participated, and we hope that gained some value from it as well.